And then last announcement is if you are just getting connected with H2O, we would love to have you guys fill out our Connect card, get to know, get connected with one of our staff, and we'll say, hey, what's up? And we'll meet up and have a great conversation, get to know you. It also is a good way to get linked for life groups, whether that's a campus group or a city group. And then you can always give towards H2O. It helps support this building, helps support some of the ministries that we do. And that is through our QR code, also in your handout. So that's my announcements for today. I'm going to welcome up Pastor Tom.
We decided at dinner the other day that since I'm uncomfortable with being called Pastor Tom, that you all have to call me Friar Tom. Which is, I was going to do a little shavy boy right here, you know. I think it'd be a good look, personally. Don't threaten me with a good time. Okay, so we are going through a series called something about wisdom, the beginning of wisdom. And last week, Matt talked about women, and we also talked about how wisdom in the Bible is personified as a woman, which I think that is not a small fact to remember and know. That when the Bible talks about wisdom and personifies it as a person, that person is feminine. I love that. So today I'm talking about this proverb. I'm going to say at the beginning here, this is very practical kind of teaching. So you're going to need a pencil. I know, or a pen. Sorry, someone told me this morning they don't have a pencil. They don't own a pencil. A pen. There are pens in the baskets under the chairs somewhere on the ends. So if you do not have a pen, locate one. The verse we are talking about today is Proverbs 14:23. It says, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. So we are talking today about hard work. So I want to start at the outset of this by defining what I believe hard work to be. I think it's three things: focused effort, overtime, and a specific direction. That's what hard work looks like. Focused effort, overtime, toward a specific direction. And so I want to ask, this is a little audience participation here, what is the hardest thing you've ever had to work for? What do you got? What's the hardest thing you've ever had to work for? I got one, yes. Getting accepted to school. Okay, great. So you're in school now? Is that currently the hardest thing you're working at? Is it harder to get into school or harder to be in school to you? Okay, it's tough, right? It's tough. Somebody else, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to work for? Abdul. Okay, so coming up with concepts for projects and then having to start over again. Okay, it feels like a circular, like you're spinning your wheels, maybe not making the progress you want. Anybody else want to share what the hardest thing that you've ever had to work for is? Yeah. Getting into county band. Okay, that's good. That's an achievement to be among the highest musicians of your peers. Okay, I thought about a lot of things with this. So my initial thought was the pieces of paper that I have. I graduated 4th in my high school class, but I wouldn't say that was a ton of work because high school was relatively easy for me, at least. Then I graduated in 4 years with a degree in physics education. I had a lot of hard classes there, 3 calc classes, physics 1, 2, modern physics, thermal physics, optical physics, material science, environmental physics. So a lot of physics classes, which were kind of tough. Some education classes, critical thinking. I had 141 credit hours. It was a lot of work. I'd say that was a prolonged duration. It was 18 credit hours, but more than that for 4 years of my life. So that was pretty tough. I also have a piece of paper from a seminary degree. That was also tough. Some other people in this room had that same degree, mostly because of how much reading it was. It was 1,000 pages per class per semester, and we were all working at the same time, which that's a lot of reading. So I thought about grad school stuff. There's a lot of literary critiques, dense theology, things that I would never read now for fun. But that was only like 2 years. And then I thought, well, I've actually been working longer than I was in school. So this is year 15 of teaching for me. I did the math. That's 22,000 hours of teaching. I think most people say that you become an expert at something after 10,000 hours. So I have a lot of time in teaching. But I wouldn't say it's the hardest thing I've had to do, because after the first couple of years and the content's established, I've been teaching the same class for 15 years. It's mostly like recycling old stuff with new people. So it's tasks that repeat and don't require that much effort to prepare anymore. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's the most I've ever had to work. Then I thought about instruments that I play. I play a lot of instruments, and I don't just say this in humility. I'm not that good. Someone let John Mark in. Okay, he's good. He's good. We figured it out. I wouldn't say that that's the hardest thing I've ever had to work at, because I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm not super great at any of them. Then I thought about my fitness, like working on my physical fitness, and I do put in effort on that, but I only started doing that in my late 20s. It's not something I've been doing my whole life. And then I thought about relationships. I think that might be actually where I landed. I think for me, parenting is the hardest thing I've ever actually had to work for. And I'm also married, so I think marriage could be something that could be the hardest thing I've had to work for too. But I think parenting for me is more difficult, because there's a lot more challenges. And the parenting for us, we also were a part of foster care. I'll talk about that journey in a minute too. There's a lot of hoops you had to jump through to get there as well. So I think for me, the hardest thing I've ever had to work at was parenting. But hard work, focused time. So for me, this was in a lot of different categories, in a specific direction for a specific period of time. So I don't know which of those is actually, I don't know what you would say is the hardest thing you had to work on, but just thinking about those things led me to 5 categories there. Educational, like getting a degree, graduating, getting into class. Informal skills, learning how to play an instrument, learning how to lift weights. Vocational or financial, learning how to work, learning how to balance a budget. Relational, being married, being a dad, being a son, being a brother. And spiritual, getting closer to God, reading my Bible, studying, meditating, going to seminary, reading dense theology. Those are all some categories. And so I want to start here in Genesis 2. This is actually not in my notes, but just go with me if you have a Bible to Genesis 2, because I think part of our purpose is to work. Part of the way that God made us. And so in Genesis 2, God's making mankind, and he puts Adam, the representative of mankind, in a garden. Here's what he says. Find the verse. Here it is, verse 13. Genesis 2, verse 15. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So I don't think it's insignificant that the reason that God put us as mankind in the Garden of Eden, that this like kind of idealized representative of what God made us to do, that it says that he put us there to work it, to tend it, that God was in this process of creation and he like involved us in it. In Genesis 1, when he makes humanity, he says, let's make mankind in our image so that they may rule with us. And so part of our just aspect of being human, just being people that God made us to do, is to put in hard work. And so I don't want to just breeze into this and talk about our mission, our vision, our goals without establishing that as our purpose, that God made us with at least part of our identity to do hard work, that doing hard work is a part of who God made us to be. And so I want to move on to another verse here. Proverbs 21 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And so what I want to do right now is to ask ourselves, how do we go from mere talk, which is the first proverb, which isn't going to get us anywhere, into hard work? How do we get from mere talk to focused effort for a specific time in a specific direction? And so a great example of this, inspired by the great theologian Ash Ketchum, he said, I want to be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my true test, and to train them is my cause. And I know. Pokemon, really? Yeah, I know. But I think you see his ultimate goal and what he's going to do to get there. I think that's like not insignificant, that we can see that even Ash Ketchum, at 9 years old, can make a mission statement and then support it with specific actions and goals to get there. So this morning, for the rest of this time, I told you this is going to be intensely practical. I want us to think about our vision, our mission, our goals, and then the actions of our life that will point us in that direction. So I'll call this kind of like some alignment between what you say your ultimate desire is and then what you are doing to point yourself that direction. The proverb I want to go to for this, I don't know if I actually put it up on the screen. I did. Proverbs 4, verses 25 and 26 says, let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you, give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. And so I think from this verse we see, look at a goal, look at the plans to get there, the steps, and then start walking. And so that's what I want us to do this morning, is to take some moments to think about our ultimate goals, our ultimate vision, and then what we're doing along the path to get there. So this can be somewhat specialized. I don't think we all need to have the same exact ultimate vision for our life, but I do think Jesus sheds some light on this. When Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he said, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And of course, people immediately try to find loopholes and then say, well, who counts as my neighbor? And that's when he gives the famous parable of the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, where the religious leaders, the religious people saw this guy who got beat up and robbed and was lying on the road bleeding, and they went out of their way to avoid him. And it was actually the social outcast who ended up being this guy's neighbor, the one who was looked down upon by all the people who from the area, who was the one who not only got the guy the help he needed, but put himself on the line financially and sacrificially gave for this other person. And so for me, I think my ultimate aim is kind of along this. And I freely admit that I have a long way to go. But my ultimate aim, I would say, is to put others before myself, to live with sacrificial love. That's what I would call my ultimate purpose, because that's the way I understood Jesus' teachings to be his ultimate aim. When asked what the greatest commandment is, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. And so as much as I can, and you can style that however you want to style that, that I hope is my ultimate vision. And so I want to give you guys just a couple of minutes here to write down an ultimate vision statement for your life. So if I asked you that question, what is the ultimate aim of your life? How would you answer that? I want to give you some time here to maybe make a note on the handout or in a journal, or just spend like maybe 2 or 3 minutes thinking about that, how you might answer that question. What is the ultimate aim of your life? Go ahead. All right, so if you're still working, that's fine. You keep working. This is not really meant to be like a let's get all of our stuff and our whole life figured out. More like a let's take a moment and think. So feel free to keep writing. I love that. If your gaze is straight ahead, if you're doing what that proverb says, you're looking straight ahead, you're looking down, you're fixing your path. If you have your ultimate aim in your life, mine was to live out the selfless teachings of Jesus better every day. That's my ultimate aim. Live out the selfless teachings of Jesus better every day. The next part of that, once you have where your gaze is fixed, that's your direction, specific direction. The question is, how do you move in that direction? And so the next level under your ultimate vision, I would call your missions, the missions of your life. And it would be thinking about the categories under that vision. So what does it specifically look like for you to live out that mission? Because what living selfless teaching of Jesus looks like for me will look different from what living a selfless teaching of Jesus looks like for you. You have a different background, different family, different job, different role, different part of your life. So your specific missions are going to be specific to you. For Ash Ketchum, that was to catch Pokemon and to train them. I wish I had Ash Ketchum's alignment at age 9. For the Good Samaritan, that was to get the man some help and then to financially put himself on the line. So the question I want to ask us to think about right now is, what are the unique roles that God has given you? What are these spaces and spheres of influence where you find yourself, and what would it look like for you to do those things toward your ultimate goal? And so if the vision is the big picture, your goals are your specific part. If someone pulled your thread out of the tapestry, what would it look like is the question here. And so I kind of ranked mine. I had a lot more time to think than you guys did, but I ranked mine in order of importance. And my top 3 in my missions are this. Are they on the screen? Yes, they are. To be a godly, selfless example for my sons as they learn how to be humans, and to be a godly, selfless husband to my wife and love her like I love myself, and then to be physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, to look after myself and those specific categories. Physically, mentally, and spiritually look after my own health. And I have more further down the list. But if you're looking for some examples for my life, the specific arenas I find myself in that are most important to me to live out my vision, my missions, are those 3. To take care of my sons, to be a good husband, and to take care of myself. So again, I'm going to give you some time here, a few minutes, to think about the missions of your life. What arenas has God put you in, and what does it look like for you to live them out? Go ahead. have a couple others too. I'll just share them with you. They're not on the screen behind me, but I spend a lot of my day working with students. I'm a high school teacher. So the fourth one on my list was to kindly, which I do not always do, teach my students to be critical thinkers so they can make money one day. So the goal is that my students, after they are out of my class, are better at thinking than they walked in. I could care less, truly, if they know what a proton is or can calculate velocity. I'm not concerned that much about that. What I'm concerned about is, can they think? Can they support their statements with evidence? Can they be problem solvers? Because that's what's going to ultimately end up having them be a successful human being who makes money and hopefully can stay out of poverty. And that's my goal. And then two more: to draw others towards spiritual sensitivity and awareness of God, and then to financially support people in the world who truly need it. So there's a lot more goals on my list, but I think just 3 is a good place to start. And I had them ranked there, I think, in priority order. So now we're kind of at like the ground level here. So there's 2 more levels, I think. The next one I would put is goals. Goals are achievements that you need to get to in order to do your mission. And so one of the things on my list, the top one of my missions, was to be a godly dad. To become a godly dad, my wife and I decided to go through foster care, which that meant doing classes. That meant getting a case study. That meant saying yes to a phone call and then being a foster parent for a while. And those are all goals that we had to check off to get certified, to get our home study done, and to meet up with social workers. And that became a lot of tasks underneath that as well. To become a teacher, I had to get a college degree, which meant taking environmental physics and modern physics and optical physics and thermal physics and introduction to education and education in pluralistic society and taking all those classes and then doing my student teaching. So there are goals along the way, boxes that you have to check in order to go along your path, along your steps. Between your ultimate vision and where you're standing right now are steps you have to take, mountains you have to climb over, boulders you got to smash. So those are your goals. So when you look toward your ultimate vision, when you think about your specific path, what are the landmarks that you need to cross along the way? What are the goals you need to achieve to fulfill your mission? That's the next moment of reflection here. What are the things that you got to do? What are the goals on your list to check off to accomplish your mission? So I'll give you some time to think. And it's okay, too, if you have some of those already checked off. If you are along the path a little bit, you can kind of look back at some of the goals that you've ticked off as well, too. But I'll give you a couple moments to think. What are some goals along the way of your steps here? Go ahead. All right. So again, I'm sure we have lots more things to think about, but the spot we're at right now, we're at the ground level. We've got the ultimate vision. We got our unique missions. We've got our goals, the blocks that we're going to have to climb on to get our way there. The last step is actions. I think very often we think, oh, I ought to watch what I eat, or I ought to read my Bible more, or pray more, and I should spend less money on this, or I should go work out, or very often we think about actions because we have some nebulous sense of what's above us. But I think it's much more powerful for us to actually think about our actions when we're looking at the pathway all the way through the alignment, from the actions to the goals to the missions to the vision. So I'll give you some examples of this, but I want you to think about the things that you can do now that get you to your goals. And so here's some examples. I bet you're tracking with me. But when we were working toward becoming parents, as I mentioned, we had to do a case study. We had to do the classes. And so the actions we had to take were go to the website, sign up for the classes, call a caseworker, go take the classes. There were physical, actual things, to-do lists that I'm not going to pretend like I did most of. Lauren carried me all the way through that whole process. So give her all the credit for that. I'm sure that surprises no one. But there were specific things that we had to do along the way to make that happen. So those phone calls, those websites, those appointments, those meetings, those classes, all those little actions along the path to getting certified, but they ended up getting us to that point. When I was in school, as a lot of you know, there's a lot of assignments that you have to do in school to get your grade in those classes. And if you don't do them, you will not pass the class and you will not get to your goal. So if you are on your way, if graduating is a goal that you have, the actions are do the things. One of my missions is to be mentally, physically, and spiritually locked in. So one of the things to keep myself physically healthy is that I try my best to do cardio at least twice a week because I'm trying to survive. I know, cardio, right? Because I'm trying to survive until I'm 70, 80. I want to see my grandkids. I want to be around. And I was not on a path to get there if I hadn't started actually running sometimes. So I play basketball twice a week. I run the YMCA at 6 a.m. on a Saturday when I can. That's my time, and I put in as much cardio there as I can. I also try to lift weights twice a week. And this year I've done leg day like most weeks. I know. You would never know by looking at me, right? But if my goal is to be physically checked in for my kids, the steps I have to do are cardio twice a week, lift twice a week. Those are the things in my schedule, the blocks of my schedule that have to get done. And so there are a ton of examples I could give here. I'm sure that you probably already have some in mind. But I think a couple things about this. One, put those actions, if they are important to you, at important points in your schedule. If you are not a morning person and you say that your goal is to get closer to Jesus and you want to read your Bible more often, don't pencil that in your schedule at 6 a.m. If you are a person who's going to hit snooze 12 times, don't put your important priorities at low priority points of your day. Check in with Jesus on your lunch break where you know you're going to be awake, you know you're going to have some time and some space. Another thing, too, I think it's very important for us to talk about community and to be connected with accountability. If you make a goal that you want to do leg day once a week, tell someone and then hold them accountable for it. Let them ask you, hey, how was leg day this week? And then just wait for a response because you are going to be more inclined to fulfill your commitments, to go do your goals, to do those actions if there's another person on mission with you, alongside you, poking you in a good direction. So if you share your ultimate vision, your ultimate goals, your ultimate actions with another person, they can have accountability with you and help you go do those things. And so the question I want to ask here is, what are the things that you need to do to accomplish your goals and your missions? What are the actual actions that you need to take to support yourself along your journey? So I'll give you, this is the last time we'll have any think time here before we wrap it up, but I'll give you a couple more minutes here to think. What are the actions you need to engage in? What are the blocks in your schedule, the activities you want to put on the calendar weekly or daily or monthly that will help you accomplish those things that you said you want to go do. So have a couple more minutes here to think about that. So the disciplined person asks the question, does doing this help me get there? That's the question to ask yourself as you look for alignment between your ultimate goal, your individual missions, your goals, your sub goals, and then the actions that you're taking. Is, are you taking those steps to get where you ultimately want to go? And so how can we tell that we've done hard work? If we look at ourselves, we are not the same that we were years ago. That's how you can tell. I can lift more weights now than I could. I can run longer now than I could. I know more Bible verses now than I used to. I am more patient with my kids now than I used to. And so the things that would make me run to my other forms of living, the other things I used to do, I don't end up going there anymore. That's how I can tell I've put in hard work. And so it amounts to a lot of boring decisions. It's a lot of small decisions that end up stacking up over time to bring me to a point and to bring you to a point where you can look back and see, I've put in hard work and I've gotten places. I'm further along the path now than I was. And that's only by the grace of God that we can get there. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing a couple more songs, and we'll call it a morning. God, I thank you for bringing us along the path the way that you have. Father, I thank you for building us up where hard work is a part of who we are, that you've made working hard, that you've made putting in effort a part of what it means for us to be truly human. And so, God, I pray that today we would think more about our ultimate goal, that we would look along the path, that we'd fix our gaze at a point ahead of us and then think about all the ways that we can work to get there. Father, help us to lean on each other, help us to lean on you, and help us to find that effort and that motivation to continue on the path and put in hard work. And I pray. Amen.
All right.